The next thing which we need to see is how to actually create a copy of a particular object. Now, you might be thinking that what's the big deal in creating a copy? We can create a new object and then, assign that using the equal to operator, and then, we have a copy of the object. But there's a problem in this, and let me show you that. For this, I created a new class known as object clone. And let's say, for example, in this, I want to create some instance variables. So for example, I would create an ID, and for example, I would create a name. And now in this, let me add constructor as well. So now we have a constructor based on this particular object. We are wanting to create it using an ID and a name. Now in this main, I create a new object of this object clone class, and let me just call it obj, and this is going to be created using the new keyword like always. And now I want to pass in the ID of, let's say, 1, and name would be name1. So this is a simple thing. Now I want to create another object obj 2, let's say, for example, and I want to create a copy of this particular obj in this. So I'm going to create it using the new keyword, let's say. So I'm going to use the same thing again, but now I want to actually put everything in of obj into obj1. So this is what I want to do. And let me actually have a default constructor as well. So the fields are not really relevant over here. So yeah, what I want to do is I want to actually put everything in obj1, and now I want to print what is there in the ID of, let's say, obj1. So this is something which I'm going to put in my sysout, and I want to cut this from here, paste this over here, and I want to run this now. So now we do have the ID of 1, so we do have, things from obj into obj1. But now let's say, for example, I want to change what is there in obj1.id. So now let's say, for example, I make it 2. And now when I try to print this, we do have 2 over here in obj1. Now let me actually try to access what is there in obj. The original object which we created with the ID 1. What is the ID of that? When I try to print this, we have the ID to be 2, but actually the ID was 1, right? What we did is we changed the ID of obj1 to 2, but we did not actually change the ID of obj. So why is this happening? Why couldn't we just have a copy and then work independently with that copy? And the reason for that is when we actually try to copy an object into another, we are not actually, creating a new memory with, the ID and the name, and then, pasting that in obj1. What we are doing is simply we are taking a new reference of obj1 pointing to the exact same object which we created using this particular ID and name. So now what's happening is that obj and obj1 both point to the same object. And that's why, when I make a change in obj1, the change is also propagated to obj. This is not something which we want. We want to work on obj1 differently, and we want to make obj to be intact, the way it was. For that, we actually need to use something known as clone, and we would want to actually implement the cloneable interface. So what I would do over here is I would actually implement the cloneable interface, and this is an interface which Java provides to me so that I'm able to create an object clone, or I'm able to create a deep copy of this object. So here what I would do is I would create a public method which is going to return object, and that's going to be called clone. And this is actually going to let me first type in what I want to do over here. So this is simply going to return super.clone, and this is going to call the clone method of super. Now here it's saying you should add a throws declaration, because this may throw a clone not supported exception just in case it's not supported. So this is something which we would add over here. But now we do have this clone method implemented in this object clone class, and now I can use this particular clone method to call with this particular new object which we created. So I would call the clone method, and now what we want to do is, first of all, we have to add, the cast that, this clone method should generate an object clone, because that's the class which we are using. It should generate an object clone and assign it to obj1. And this is something which it is saying to surround in try and catch. So we would be surrounding it in try and catch. And then once it is created, what I would want to do is, change the ID of obj1, and then, probably try to print what is the ID of obj1 for now. So when I try to do this, what we do have is 2, because we did change the ID of obj1. But what is the ID of obj now? When I try to print this, now we do have the ID of obj to be 1 only, and that is something which we have declared it using this particular statement, right? So that means whatever changes I make to obj1, now it doesn't matter to obj. Why? Because we have actually created a deep copy meaning that we actually created a new object and assigned it to obj1, and then we are able to independently work with that without worrying about what is happening within our original obj object. And this is how you should definitely use the clone method. Just implement the cloneable interface, and then override the clone method just by calling super.clone, and this should be able to create a deep copy of your object for you, so that you are independently able to work with that particular copy, instead of working on the same exact object and getting troubled by the issues caused because of not using clones. So I would just format it a bit and save it for your reference. So this is how you would use a clone method of a particular object in Java.